Safety. When I guess we talk about safety, we need to talk a little bit about the fear. And I guess by fear, I mean the survival fear, the fear for our survival, which of course in our society is much more about belonging, performing within our society, making sure that we are accepted, but also, worrying about our jobs, our everyday stressors. So we can have enormous amount of this survival fear, in fact. And last year, I've actually had quite a major breakthrough. I had a session with a somatic practitioner, and because I was doing already quite a lot previous work with embodiment and mindfulness, in this session, I was able to kind of connect with my own fear and actually release it. And it was such a such a striking feeling. I literally during the session, like after I kind of let it go, I just had to sit back and spread. I was like, wow, my body never felt like that. And through that, I realized how much actually I was stuck in survival and how much of my whole life I built from the fear of survival. So, I used to have this career in the kind of in tech industry, working a corporate job. I was doing very, very well. But eventually, it ended up with burnout because my whole career was built from my fear of survival, from trying to establish, safety in the world. My relationship, it really affected. I realized once I released, I realized how much it affected all of my life and how much it was actually limiting me, right? Because when we are stuck in the survival, we only focus on just that. We cannot open up to the world in a way that, allows us to kind of live our life to our full potential with fulfillment and joy, right? Because when we are stuck in fear, it's very difficult for us to relax enough to actually just enjoy life, right? So this is why I wanted to have this session today based around fear, because I think it's really important topic, and I wish that everybody could get out of this survival and kind of live more happy life. So in the exercises today, we will be exploring feelings of safety, right? And when I started this work, I was very surprised when I started this work on myself, I was very surprised when I started first connecting to the feeling of safety, how much I never had a chance to feel it before. I never realized how much under fear I was living and how new those feelings of safety were for me. So this is something I want to bring in today. We will do just in a moment an exercise, which is one of my favorite exercises. And what we'll do, we visualize a beautiful garden that's have maybe a wall around it or a nice fence that set the safety for us. We'll do this beautiful visualization of this garden when we can actually relax. And once we're able to relax in our imaginary garden, we then gonna actually feel into the safety within that garden, within our bodies. So this is one way to kind of connect with those feelings of safety. It's actually a resourcing technique, so it is used in somatic practice to bring sense of safety and calmness. So this is something we will explore next. So whenever you're ready, I will again ask you to sit back. Close your eyes. Arrive again in your body. Feel into your sitting bones, pressing against the ground or the chair. Exploring the sensations of being firmly held by the ground or the chair. Maybe we can relax a little bit more back into the support or down into the ground. Noticing how the breath moves through the body, how it expands the chest, how it lifts the belly, up and down, in and out. Simply notice the sensations that are present in your body right now. And you can slowly start to imagine a beautiful garden. The sun is shining, and all sorts of beautiful flowers within your garden. You can imagine the space you are sitting in. Maybe it's a bit of decking or a gazebo. Maybe simply you're just sitting on the lawn. You can imagine all the comforts and cushions and whatever can make you comfortable in this beautiful space. And start to imagine whether your garden is surrounded by a wall or a fence. Or maybe you even prefer to have it open, it's up to you. Set the boundary of your garden in whatever way makes you feel safe within that garden. Take a moment to feel the sunshine on your skin. Maybe there is sound of birds. Maybe you can even imagine the scent of flowers that are surrounding you. And as you sit in the middle of that garden, start to feel into sensations of your body, the sensations of safety and calm. See if you can find them within yourself. Connect with any sensations in your body that signal safety. And simply notice what arises without any judgment, simply observing. Get familiar with this sense of safety. And if you still cannot feel safe, maybe at least there are some areas that feel more relaxed or warm that you can connect to. Hmm. Slowly, you can start to bring yourself back into the room. Just taking your time to open your eyes again and look around the room without any rush. Amazing. Yeah, and I think actually this is kind of the best we can expect sometimes because the truth is we think, in meditation we suddenly gonna be like floating in the clouds, but actually much more often we are, still stuck in thinking and our anxieties sometimes. But it's actually about catching those kind of glimpses of relaxation. That's really what we can give us. And of course, as we practice, then it's easier and easier. But um, it's also expected that it is like that because unfortunately we live in a very chaotic and stressful lives, most of us. This is really great exercise, actually, whenever we are, in quite a upheaval or when we are quite restless. It's just really lovely exercise to, that we can do. I quite like to do it sometimes before I go to sleep, because I find, yeah, it definitely calms me down, and it's just a lovely exercise that we can do, like anytime, even when we're in the garden actually enjoying the sun, we can also connect with those feelings there, even better. I think when we talk about fear and unsafety, it's quite important to understand that it has to do a lot with our physiognomy, right? So quite a lot of times, we can watch these talks that tells us about like, oh, let go of your fear, blah blah blah, open up to the life, and or sometimes I go to workshops and I hear people say like, oh, you can relax now, you are in the safe space, but like it doesn't just work like that because actually the fear and unsafety doesn't sit in our head, but actually it sits in our physiognomy, right? So this is where our nervous system or the part of nervous system that is responsible for activation and rest come in place. So we have these two kind of systems that work with each other. So one which activates our fight and flight response. So let's imagine, we are walking on the beach and there is big aggressive dog running at us with a frothy mouth. And we are like, okay, we're gonna tend to run or fight, which is, our response. And then we have the second part of that nervous system, which kind of then helps us to calm down after a stressful event. And this kind of functioning of nervous system is very normal and very desired because that's how we function. But unfortunately, in our society and our lives, we can be quite permanently stuck into these activation states, right? Into these fight and flight responses because for example our stressful jobs means that we can never fully relax, and even though at the weekend we meant to take rest, actually we still kind of keep on thinking about all the problems we have, or if there is trauma present. And I think that's definitely was my experience. But I would say life is quite traumatic as well. So we don't even have to have anything too traumatic happening to us to still kind of, be traumatized by life. um, which then means that we are kind of stuck in this chronic unsafety, right? So unfortunately, our society is such that we have this tendency to be kind of stuck in there. And this is why it's so difficult for us to relax and feel safe, because actually our nervous system is kind of running on full speed. And even though sometimes we try to brake, we cannot, it's like if you have a car driving at, 150 miles an hour, you don't expect it to just stop instantly, right? It takes time to stop. And even worse, if we keep on accelerating and then keep on pressing brake, but we never take off the foot off the pedal, as so many of us do in our busy lives, then we actually can go into these freeze responses where we become totally paralyzed and immobilized. So actually, not only we can experience this kind of fight or flight, but also we can have an opposite reaction when we are totally immobilized. And this is really difficult to get out of, and especially if you have some kind of trauma, it's really difficult to get out of these states and actually return to this safety where we can, start to enjoy life more fully. And we do that through this kind of exercises, through kind of starting to explore safety on the body level, just as we did with the garden, right? We imagined ourselves in the safe situation, and then we connected with the feelings, or try to connect with the feelings of safety and comfort within our body. And the kind of goal is to really start to explore that and spend more and more time there to really start to get familiar with what it feels to feel safe, right? And once we have this foundation of being able to tap into that safety, then we can actually start to work with our fear, right? We can start to slowly dip our toes in, not jump right in, but just try to dip our toes, see what was the fear there? What was it? What is it telling me? Where is it sits? And then slowly, bit by bit, we can actually start to explore our deeply rooted fears and then feel them and release them within the capacity to feel safe, right? Because one of the things we don't want to do, and this is why we never jump right into the water, because we need to feel safe to be able to handle such emotions, right? So this is really important that we start to build the foundation when we can actually start to deal with bigger things, but not until we are kind of feeling ready. And really, these embodiment classes are about building this foundation so that if you wish to take, and it's not just for safety, it's for many different things, but really we are building the capacity to actually deal with things on the deeper level. Yeah. And I think it's really helpful to start to feel the contrast between
Yes.
safety and unsafety within our bodies, so that we can also recognize, like when do I feel unsafe? Oh,
Yes.
am I like tense or like that, or there's something in my gut?
Mhm.
Maybe I need to take it down, right? Because once we start to recognize, because this is actually, you see, the anecdote that I told you at the beginning about, how I released a lot of that fear. The most crazy thing about it was that I never felt anxious. I never realized that I was anxious at all in my life. I
Mhm.
never would say that I suffered from anxiety. Yet I had this deep underlying fear that, controlled my whole life. And I
Yes.
never even felt it before, and that's the really crazy thing. So it's actually helpful to start to
Mhm.
learn this contrast so we can actually realize where we are within our nervous system and start to bring us back to safety. Yeah, and this is kind of why we always do a few different exercises because different th people resonate with different things, you know. For me, for example, like movement and feeling in my body is important. Also, hearing, I really enjoy just listening to soundscapes. That really calms me down, but it's very different for everybody. So, yeah. And sometimes, you know, there are different occasions. For example, you know, it would be difficult to, you know, if you're in the meeting to start to imagine you're in the garden or feeling into your body. But you could, you know, do a little bit of tapping even on your legs underneath the table, you know. Those are the kind of things that you can use. And as you learn more of these tools, you can start to actually apply them much more, not just as a meditation practice that you do every morning or evening for 20 minutes, but actually in your life, right? Those are the real life skills, right? So you know, maybe like me today before this class, and you could hear that at the beginning I was quite you know, anxious, but I actually spent 10 minutes giving myself tapping to try to calm down before I came in to kind of you know, speak with you today. So they are very practical skills, and really the idea is that we learn to actually, even if it's taking a little pause for breath and kind of arrive, you know, at the beginning of the meeting on our sitting bones, that already can make the whole difference in how we function and respond to life, basically. And this is kind of the way I teach mindfulness or this kind of techniques is actually in applied way because I think that's the real power of them. When I came to this session, I already had a lot of foundation, right? So I already knew that I can handle my feelings, even very intense feelings, um, and I have the capacity to feel safe, right? Or to return to safety. And this is really kind of when you think about like the trauma kind of healing journey, this is our starting point, right? Because we don't want to get into those kind of intense feelings when we are not ready, right? So big part was that I already had that, and I think it's very important to understand that it's a longer process. It's not something that you know you can do tomorrow and suddenly you don't believe if anybody sells you on that. I don't recommend it because you can re-traumatize yourself. So I already had that foundation, and then basically in this session, I got in touch with my fear. We started to build this intensity and go really deep into like, you know, the real deep, you know, survival fear. So I was able to allow it to kind of rise up,
Mhm,
feel it, and then because I was able to feel it and acknowledge it,
mhm,
I was able to release it. And there was also a little bit of internal dialogue for me when I was able to hold myself in this fear and say to myself, because eventually a lot of that fear for me was around you know, survival, when I was basically overworking myself to keep myself safe, to you know, build the life where I could feel safe, but somehow it was never enough. Because I was so afraid, right? I was so afraid to simply just, you know, have enough money to be alive, right? And because that kind of started to come up, I was able to help myself and say, like, it's okay. You don't have to be so scared anymore. Look, I'm doing so well now. I can hold it, you know, I can. So it's a little bit of like inner child work, I suppose.
mhm,
But through feeling all of that fear and having the capacity to really go to my worst fear, because this is important. This is really crucial to understand that we have to have this capacity first.
mhm.
And then, you know, like once you're able to go through that process, and again, this was really long process. I'm talking here,
Yes.
not just, you know, yeah, and I remember, and it was very somatic, right? We really, it was all about this feeling and letting whatever comes up, comes up.
Mhm,
And yeah, it was really, I just felt it so much in the body. I even was joking to the practitioner, you know, like I feel now like this mafia boss, you know, because like, you know, like a mafia boss is I have this image that um Mafia boss doesn't like run or chase or try to do anything. Mafia boss is chilled. Everybody comes to him, you know. He's the boss. He sits back and reclines, and everything kind of comes to him, right? And I was because literally in this session, I just sat back like that, and I was like, I feel like like a mafia boss. So yeah. So this is kind of how it looked for me. I guess it's
Mhm.
different for everybody and depends on the peers. But yeah, really, it's about building this foundation first to build that capacity, and then probably I would recommend finding a good somatic practitioner that can guide you safely through that. Because I think it's easy to, I mean, of course, for me, this was very profound, but I think there was also a lot of smaller moments of releases along the way. So I think it's not always, we like the big releases because they're so obvious, they're so nice, right? And you're like, oh, now I'm liberated. But actually, some of this can also happen in a very small ways, right? When we let go of little things over and over and actually also build it up into something bigger. So yeah, I think it's very individual process. Yeah. There is so many things we can do, right? And dance is a wonderful process to regulate and to get in touch with ourselves and to actually acknowledge that the intelligence of our body, right? That our body kind of knows what it's doing. And I guess that's why I also bring this fear to the physiognomy, right? Because it is all happening in our body. Of course, there
Mm.
is the element of cognition and head, but actually a lot of time when we let our body do its thing, you know, that's kind of where a lot of this healing comes without us overthinking and over trying and
Mhm.
yeah. So thanks so much for joining.